introduction.
I'm David LG Hughes, LG as in Lloyd George, as in David Lloyd George Hughes, as in my father wanted to guarantee I got picked on at school as a character building exercise, no doubt. I left film school at 21. I had no connections to the film industry at all, so I had to do what most people in that situation do and use education as a way in. So I left film school at 21 and was fortunate enough to get a job making movie trailers. And I seem to specialize in something called sales promos, which are kind of longer form trailers, not for the general public, for the international film world, where you get a situation where a film is being made completely independently or semi-independently by a company that then wants to sell the distribution rights to the movie around the world. So, for example, BBC Film makes a movie. They don't have the infrastructure to distribute that movie in America or wherever, so they need to sell it to someone like the Weinsteins or whoever. And what tends to happen is 3 times a year at the AFM, which is just finished in Santa Monica yesterday, at Cannes, and at in correlation with the Berlin Film Festival, we have the EFM, the European Film Market. It's basically like a big expo of movies that are to be made, being made, and in post-production. And sales agents are trying to find distributors around the world to pick it up. And of course, people haven't got time to watch entire movies, or if the films aren't finished or whatever. They come to someone like myself to put together like a 2 or a 3 or a 5 or a 7-minute version of the movie. And what was wonderful for me in doing this is that it gave me the chance to work directly often with the filmmakers on the movies, because the filmmakers were still there, the directors were still there. Because often when a movie's delivered to a studio, the director's off onto the next thing or whatever, but the director was physically still in the cutting room working on the movie as I was making my sales promo. And the wonderful thing about that for me is that I got this opportunity to work with some majorly brilliant filmmakers. I spent time working with Sir Richard Attenborough, with Guillermo del Toro, with Ken Loach, with Darren Aronofsky, huge range of really, really brilliant filmmakers. And I guess the one thing I learned from all of them, they all had in common, was just this incredible will to get on with it and make a movie. And I think that's what I took from them. And all the time when I was sort of doing the sales promos and all that kind of stuff, that was kind of my day job. In the background, I was sort of scribbling away, trying to write stuff. And I finally wrote a sort of 17-page script, which was the shortest I was able to ever write. I really struggle writing short things. I think it's incredible art, those people who can write 5-minute scripts but this is so a 17-minute piece, which is actually something I extracted from a longer script. I thought, well, I can, using the skills that I learned as a promo guy of sort of taking the essence of a 90-minute movie and boiling it down to 7 minutes or whatever. I kind of took the essence of one screenplay and took one sort of strand of it and focused on that and turned that into its own little 17-minute piece. And I shot it on a little HDV camera for literally 150 quid or something. And it did incredibly well on iTunes. Really, really lucky to see it do so well in iTunes. And I thought, well, that'll be my calling card. Knock, knock, knock. When's the door going to come? I'll just, I'll start writing these scripts. And of course, 2 or 3 years later, it hadn't been, nobody come knocking. Yeah. So I thought, well, what I'll do is, I know I was lucky enough to get 2 really, really good actors in my short. And I got them because the parts were fun. And I thought, well, what I really need is good actors. I'm not going to get a good actor to give me a month for free, because it's too much to expect. So I'll write an ensemble piece, because I know I can get a week, a few days or whatever. I can do that, and I'll pull that all together. And using that concept, and then thinking about what locations I had available to me, what sort of vehicles I had available to me. I knew a lot of guys that lived in and around Essex, so I had access to kind of lots of BMWs and big sort of Essex boy mansion houses and all this kind of stuff. So I thought, well, I'll take that attitude and I'll use all those things and I'll write myself a crime picture. And out of that, my film Harball Suites was made, and that was made for exactly £37,000. Which basically meant that we didn't spend anything on the movie itself. Right. The only thing we spent money on was insurance and catering and travel. Fortunately enough, because of my work with various sales agents, things like that, I was able to get it in front of a sales agent, and that sales agent agreed to take it on. And the next thing I knew, I was getting a phone call from Cannes saying that Universal wanted to buy the movie. So Universal bought the movie and put it out around the world. And here I am now, speaking to your good self.
Wow, that's an amazing game of Frogger, going from doing the short edits, then going into your 10-minute piece, and then to a feature. You must really have worked hard at the craft of filmmaking. Not just so many filmmakers today have a camera, and it seems like that's the first port of call, is to get this device.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, what you need, and it's actually something I'm learning now, sort of going from the kind of what is technically a no-budget film. I think anything under £50,000 is a no-budget film, if we use the Rain Dance kind of scale of things. Yeah. So from a no-budget film to a low-budget movie. So I've got a couple of scripts now that we've raised the finance for, on the understanding that we can get a cast that justifies spending that level of money on. So the problem that I had then, which is actually I need to write good parts in order to get professional actors to work for deferred salaries. Right. I now have, it's the same problem now. I need to write parts that are good enough to excite, really, valuable in terms of the accountant's eyes, yes. Actors to want to do the movie, because ultimately that's what kind of gets these things off the ground. The actors have all the power, what's going to get good actors in your movie is not the fact that you can borrow your mate's Ari, or that you've got some Steadicam buddy who's going to come in and do it. Sure. The only thing that's going to get actors interested in is the parts, and can you write really, really good parts? And I mean, certainly when I was starting out, nobody was going to give me a script for starters. So if I was going to make a movie, who the hell am I? Some guy who makes trailers. Nobody's going to give me a script to direct. Yeah. So if I was ever going to do anything, I was going to have to write my own. Sure. And the best place, like of anything, is to read other screenplays. Right. And when I was starting at university and at film school, you had to go into university, and they had maybe 100 scripts maximum, which that was it. That was the only screenplays, and it was kind of so you kind of read them all. But now with Google, you're 2 clicks away from reading any screenplay you ever have wanted to read. Whether it's an old movie like Chinatown or The Godfather or The Goodfellas or whatever. Or if you want to read, the new Tarantino movie, it's there on the net if you want to go looking for it, And I can't stress enough how vital it is, the writing and the telling, because that's when you start to tell the story, is with the screenplay. It's not with great camera moves and whatever. That should all be there to tell the story, but you've got to have a story to tell first. Sure. And that's the script.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of from my background, I learned a lot of film theory, and that's where I jumped off into my career 14 years ago. Was by understanding the nuts and bolts, what was going to underpin all these visuals. It gave me a sense of where I wanted to go, and I think this is a really exciting time for filmmakers. I just think that there's so much more to filmmaking.
Well, I think it's easier now than ever to get into it, in terms of, it's probably harder than ever to make a living at it because of that, but it's easier now than ever. I mean, basically anyone with a smartphone can make a movie now. I mean, you really can. Yeah. I mean, if you think, and you can say, but you can't record sound or whatever. If you look at kind of what Robert Rodriguez did on his first movie, he was he didn't have sync sound. He made El Mariachi for next to nothing, and he's done really well out of it, and a lot of the filmmakers back in their first films didn't have actual sync sound. Okay, people like the original pioneers of independent cinema, people like John Waters and stuff like that. And I've touched on this with you in the past. What I could name you sort of 10 or so key filmmakers for myself, and just 5 would be, Kubrick, Scorsese, David Lynch, the Coen brothers, and Christopher Nolan. And the one thing that those 5, and I could list you another 20, but those 5 have in common is not just that they're brilliant, but actually how they got their start. And how they got their start was they either self-financed or completely outside of the system by borrowing from family and friends.
Yeah.
They scraped the money together themselves to make their movies. Kubrick had to pay for his first 2 movies because nobody would look at him, and he turned out quite good.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Yeah, so I think if you're thinking about doing it, just do it. I don't. Don't worry about the fact that you haven't got. You can't get a steady cam or this, that, and that's not what's stopping you. Look at what Kevin Smith made a movie, was working in a convenience store, a local off license or whatever that we have over here. Yeah. His boss said you could film there. He had a location, so he shot the entire thing, with the most basic of equipment. And and you watch that now, and you think, well, I remember watching it in the cinema and you think, God, this looks terrible for the first 30 seconds. And then I started laughing and getting engaged in the characters and following and wanting to go on this journey with them. And I forgot all about the fact that it was in black and white and barely in focus, and and the camera never moved. You forget about all that stuff because the storytelling, the characters you fall in love with and you want to spend time with, and
I think you can do an awful lot with picture, but sound in particular, bad sound puts you off.
Well, it kills you
in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it kills you. And
like you say,
I had it on my short film. I had terrible sound on my short film, and it was a nightmare because you've done all this work and it's like, but you can't hear it, and you haven't got the money to ADR or whatever, And
a friend of mine who runs a facility who does some ADR work says that in general, most big budget pictures tend to have, a lot of the audio is then re-recorded.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the numbers, on some movies as high as 70-80%, it's redone. And I'm working here at out of the Gothenburg Film Studios, and they're doing ADR in a movie, and what they're finding is that they're completely rewriting the script now as well.
Right.
That's kind of like the whole swathes of dialogue that weren't in the original screenplay are now being recorded and built into scenes and stuff like that. So
the special features on Raiders of the Lost Ark has a whole thing on the scene inside Marion's bar, and how they created all the sound, but then also how they had to re-record all the voice and all that stuff. It's it was quite surprising.
Yeah, and, I think we had 4 hours of ADR on Hardboard Suites. That's all we could afford. But luckily, also, we had a lot of really experienced actors. Talking of Raiders of the Lost Ark, we had Paul Freeman, of course, and Paul didn't do a single line of ADR because we didn't need to, and we recorded Paul's voiceover in a little off from the set while everybody was changing in just a little room in his mind. We didn't need to go anywhere else because just a brilliant actor. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this new and direct way to get films out through things like Netflix and Amazon? Because I see, for instance, on Amazon they've got a facility for writers. I don't know if you've come across that.
I haven't looked into that. I think what's great is that, with all these kind of on-demand things, just the internet in general, it's a way of getting things out. I think the cinemas for kind of independent movies, for the kind of stuff that I do, cinema releases are going to be rarer and rarer. I think, it's now about tentpole movies. It's now about, the big superhero movies, Bonds, those kind of things. That's what's going to end up in the cinemas. And, where there used to be sort of niche cinemas that you would go and see things like, when I was, you go and see Reservoir Dogs or whatever. These things, I don't, unless Tarantino's always going to get into cinemas, of course, but, the next one, I think it's going to be harder and harder for these guys to get into cinemas. Yeah. And I think what's great about, the quality of everybody's screens now and the quality of everyone's TVs now is that, of course, it's never going to replace the cinema experience. But, I've got to be honest, the movies that I fell in love with, the movies that were kind of really inspired me, that I watched when I was 15 or 16, the vast majority of them, if I'm honest, the first time I watched them was on VHS. Yeah. So, I saw Goodfellas, which is like such a monumental movie to me. I saw Goodfellas on VHS, which means that the image was pan and scan, which essentially means I was watching 1/3 of the movie. And I was seeing it a little bit on a 4:3 screen. So I was watching 1/3 of the movie. But not only that, the more I watched it, the more that VHS got worn out, the more it looked like I was watching it through snow. It was snowing in all those scenes in the end. And yet I loved that movie. And, very few movies that I've seen in HD, glorious HD or projected in 4D, have touched me in a way that VHS touched me as a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And what it comes back to is what we started again talking about is the quality of the performances, the quality of the acting, which all comes out of the screenplay.
Yeah, I guess you and I are not dissimilar in age. We come from a time when, of course, when you had VHS, you knew no different, and you never had an idea that you were one day going to be blessed with HD and Ultra HD, and I remember myself. You at that time when suddenly your parents had a VHS machine, it was like the doors were open to this whole world of movies. You didn't have to look through the Radio Times to find something good.
No, exactly. And I remember having a kind of a Leonard Maitland book of films, and I would read this like a little Bible going through, because there was no internet, there was no like, I want to find out about Scorsese, Google. Yeah. There was none of that.
There was a Time Out 1,000 best movies or something like that.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
You'd be like, what have I seen? What have I seen? It's like, I haven't seen that one by Scorsese, and they weren't listed by directors. So I would kind of go my favorite directors. I was a big David Lynch fan, and I'd say, I know he's made these 5. Are there any more? I'll work through all the A's looking for them all, and they weren't anymore. And I'd kind of went through this book, 5,000-page book, looking for another film by David Lynch, because I couldn't Google it. There was no IMDb. There was, but as I say, that VHSs that I played, it would the quality of the picture and the sound was atrocious, coming out of a little mono speaker, and yet that's how I fell in love with cinema, because of the quality of the storytelling.
I think,
and you can the image that you can get out of your iPhone is 1 billion times better than what people have watched on VHS.
Yeah.
And so don't feel the need for huge, expensive camera rigs or whatever hold you back. Just work on your story and find out what you've got around you, and maximize that. That's kind of what I did. And if I can do it, crack on.
Yeah. I started with a £2,000 loan from the bank, where I bought a Mac.
Yeah.
This is in 1999, and I had a £1,500 camera. I thought it was the bee's knees. It was brilliant. Yeah. And now, of course, today I've got my iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's incredible. Somebody who maybe sort of started into filmmaking in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
I think, wow, they're so lucky.
Yeah.
They also don't realize that just previous to that, even no internet, there wasn't even a way to really share movies.
No, exactly.
It's incredible to think that, in 2001, you still couldn't just quickly make a DVD.
No, exactly.
Studio Pro came out in like 2002. Gone up like a rocket. I think that the focus is all on technology.
If you want to be a cinematographer, it's a different question. But if you want to be a director or a writer, then I think you should be focusing on those things, using what you've got to your advantage. I mean, what I can do on my new iPhone, I couldn't do on the DSLR that I shot Hardboiled Sweets on. I couldn't shoot any. There's no slow motion in my film because I didn't have that ability. It didn't stop me from making a film. Yeah. People might say it should have done, but
I think it's going to be very interesting in the next sort of three years or so, as the infrastructure for the internet increases and gets better.
Yeah.
And we have better streaming, and you have things like Ultra HD on your Netflix.
Yeah.
But also, I'd love to speak to someone at Amazon or Netflix, because I think it needs more exposure. I think there's an incredible way for talented writers to, there's a tiny little hole, and you just got to aim straight for it and go for it. But I think within the industry there needs to be a little bit more openness and a way to embrace new talent.
Yeah, and also the traditional way is a little bit sort of screenplay contests, and there's still a lot of those about. I mean, certainly my short film, I submitted it to a screenplay, and I got to the finalists, and as a finalist, you got to go in and meet a load of industry insiders, you know. And having that experience and having people that made real films say that, yeah, this is I'd like to see this as a movie, kind of gave me personally the confidence to go off then and make the film, you know. Yeah. And I think so there are things like that as well. But I think, you know, what it comes back to, and you know, what Amazon and Netflix here are looking for is screenplays. No, they're not looking for guys and gals that know everything about cameras and things right now. They're looking for, you know, not looking to discover the next cinematographer. Yeah. They're looking for writers, because ideas are what drives cinema, and ideas start as screenplays, you know.
Absolutely. So have you been to the pictures recently, David?
I want to go and see Gone Girl, actually. That looks pretty good.
I saw it a couple of nights ago.
Okay. Don't give it away.
Fincher can do no wrong.
Yeah, don't give it away. What's next for me?
Yeah, what's next?
Well, I've got a couple of scripts that I'm attached to now. One I've written myself, and one I've rewritten quite substantially. Both of them American. I was fortunate enough that Hardball Sweets got me American representation, so I got a Hollywood agent, a Hollywood manager, and I quite recently signed with a UK agent as well. So I originally couldn't get arrested in the UK, but now sort of slowly but surely things are starting to sort of happen there. So yeah, so we're casting or trying to bring the cast together for 2 movies, but it's incredibly slow process. So going back to the whole old ethos of what can I do with what I have, I'm kind of living in Sweden now, and I thought, you know, in Britain the low budget thing is kind of is a gangster flick, and I think in America it would be the kind of cabin in the woods horror. I'm in Sweden and when in Rome, so I'm currently writing a Viking movie. So so I'm writing a Viking action flick right Excellent. Now. Yeah, and I recently handed in a commissioned screenplay as well, but I'm not on board to direct that because I think it's currently budgeted about 50 million. So I'm a bit of a stretch to go from £36,000 to 50. So they're not really entertaining the idea that I'll direct that, I don't think.
That's very interesting. So you must have had to go and do quite a bit of research on Vikings and that sort of thing.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're kind of immersed in it around here. It's everywhere. And I'm also, you know, a big believer in just making it up and being true to the story, you know, and kind of, you know, not getting too bogged down in anything, and you know, making your own universe, because you know, certainly I'm not so enamored in kind of realism and stuff like that. I kind of like the kind of if you can create a believable world, then I think you can get away with murder, and I think it's almost more of an achievement to create your own little world, you know, and
absolutely.
do that rather than kind of I think that's
feel
kind
that
of
you need to research and be
I mean,
some
you know, there's, you know,
existing myth or something.
Yeah, there's stuff that has to be true in order to sort of buy you into it. But I think once you get into a certain point, hopefully, again, a bit like the old VHS thing, you know, if the story and the characters are compelling enough, your audience will go with you anywhere that you take them.
Yeah. Well, the Hughes Swedish myths, I'm sure, will start to perpetrate the rest of society. They'll be doing an American version of your Viking movie, probably.
Well, I hope so. That would be fun. That would be fun. That means I got to make it.
Hollywood being what it is, because Hollywood does like to do that, don't they? Go and sort of find a nice French movie or a Scandinavian thriller. And jump on board.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, it's been great talking to you, David.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Speak again, absolutely. Brilliant, Adam. Thanks very much.
Okay.